Hello and welcome to Gin and TARDIS, a spin-off from the Doctor Who show. I'm Dave.
I'm Richard.
I'm Rob.
And after a vote from you, the listeners, we have just sat down over a few gin and tonics and watched The Mark of the Rani. How are you, gentlemen?
We've been through some stuff.
I do know that the Master says the title of the story not once, but
Twice, in case you'd forgotten. Yes.
Don't you love it when he says the title on screen? Yes, so look, we have just watched The Mark of the Rani, the lovely Blu-ray version, although not that well cleaned up.
Actually wasn't. That transfer was pretty poor in places.
It was, which was a bit disappointing. But let's start off with our memories of this story. Rob, what about you?
I have seen this once since it was broadcast on the ABC, and my abiding memory of it is Luke saving the day in the last episode. Yeah, that's my memory of... I've probably only seen it twice, now 3 times.
Richard?
Right. Yeah, I also have not watched this one for a very long time. I do remember getting up in the early 90s when they were on at 4 a.m, because I think it was one of the ones I didn't have on tape, so I sort of watched the last 5 minutes of Basil Brush and then went into Doctor Who. I think I may have watched it once since, but it would be a very long time ago.
Yeah, I definitely remember it being broadcast when I would have been about 5, I reckon.
Likewise, I did see it on broadcast, but yes.
And it's one of those ones that I don't sort of remember the story so much as remember images. I remember the volcano trap device. I remember the tree. We all remember the tree. Because, I mean, we can talk about the tree in a moment, but that is quite a memorable image. So I remember moments of this story from that first broadcast. We didn't have an off-air recording of this when I was a kid, so I didn't see it a lot. It's one of the VHSs I didn't buy. It was back in the days when I was probably a younger teenager and had to be a bit picky and choosy about which videotapes I bought, so this was one I didn't own on video. So I haven't seen it a lot growing up. I last would have watched this a few years ago when the Doctor Who show did a season 22 deep dive.
Okay.
But I certainly haven't watched it since. I haven't sat down and watched the season 22 Blu-ray since it came out. I've watched some of the extras, but not that. So definitely a rarer one, and my memory going in is that it is one of the weaker ones of the Colin Baker era, which is not an era that I remember as having a lot of strong stories, I've got to say.
Yes.
I walked into this one hoping that the passage of time and a growing fondness for Colin the man, and perhaps appreciation of what Pip and Jane Baker had to deal with and the like would mean that I would take more out of this. So after a couple of gin and tonics and an hour and a half on the couch, Richard, what did you think?
It looked good. I have to say the location filming actually does add quite a bit to it, and I think that the location they've chosen is very good. I would say Colin is not bad, and I think Pip and Jane Baker have kind of got the Sixth Doctor's character. The cast actually as a whole is fairly good, probably with one exception maybe, but I'm going to look. It is Anthony Ainley because I think he's really just superfluous.
You're skirting around a verdict here, Richard.
I am. Look, it was mildly entertaining, but overall, no, it's not very good.
Rob?
Interminable. And I mean, I too had come into this thinking, I'm seeing 80s Doctor Who, and I don't mind 80s Doctor Who, and I had some high hopes for this, and like Richard and yourself, David, it certainly looks great. It is good to be out of the studio and being in the natural environment, and they certainly, the director and the camera operator, film camera operator, make great use of that. But that's where the good stuff really basically stops. Anthony Ainley is appalling. He's in a pantomime. It's a performance that is at odds with the material. Really.
And I think, as Dave said, it's very obvious he's really been inserted into that story.
So let's come to him in a moment. So look, I'll say I thought part 1 was very, very bad. It's slow. There's very little incident. Anthony Ainley is particularly bad. And I did say at the cliffhanger, look, maybe part 2 will be better. And I think part 2 was better. There was a bit more action going on. I think once Kate O'Mara actually starts playing the Rani, rather than Rani playing an old crone, that is definitely a pick-up for the episode. Once you get into the Rani's TARDIS, that's a pick-up for the episode. I thought there are lots of really nice bits to this. And whether it is Colin's performance and the writing of Colin, whether it is the location, there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. But is this a story that hangs together well? No, it's not. I was struggling for the first episode. Second one wasn't as bad, but it is a story of incidents rather than a story of a plot.
Yes, there is a lot of nice little moments in it, but they are not enough to carry the whole thing.
So how much then does the 45-minute structure militate against this being a better experience?
I think I noticed watching it. So when you watch Attack of the Cybermen, it really feels like that was a 4-part story smashed into 2, because there's a very obvious build up to the big reveal of the Cybermen, which is obviously meant to be the original 25-minute cliffhanger and the like. This one feels like Pip and Jane obviously had no experience of writing 25-minute stories, and in fact they'd come off at this stage Space 1999 and the like. So they were probably more used to this, and yes, so there is no build up sort of to the 25-minute mark. There's a build up to the 45-minute mark, which means that it's very slow getting there.
It is, and we were all saying during the story this is actually quite slow, and it's dragging in places quite noticeably.
It is. So we said we'll talk about Anthony Ainley because that's the thing that we all mentioned.
Yep.
Yeah, I stand by what I said to you as we were watching this. It is incredibly clear that the Master was inserted into this for contractual obligation reasons.
Mm-hmm. And I think against the wishes of Eric Saywood, I'm fairly sure.
And I think Pip and Jane Baker.
Probably.
And probably everybody.
Except JNT.
Except JNT.
And Anthony Ainley. But
well, I mean, Anthony Ainley got paid whether he turned up or not, so I don't think he minded.
But if you turn up, it's incumbent upon you as an actor to actually, act, and he's not. It's a performance that is, again, like I said before, completely at odds with everything else that's going on. The more naturalistic performances, say, of the bloke who was playing his lordship, and even Stevenson, that is a performance that you can enjoy. Ainley's performance is completely artificial. It is completely artificial.
Yeah, he doesn't have anything really to do other than wave that vial of brain fluid under the Rani's nose about 17 times. But even, Rob, you pointed it out, when he's skulking around the village, he doesn't walk, he sort of...
Skulks. Yes.
He hops.
Yes.
Sort of prances.
I mean, if you watch it, it's a prance. It's not a walk, it's not it's just ridiculous. It is ridiculous. It's like he's on stage trying to get a rise out of the audience.
It's behind you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really does feel like that. Now, to be fair, he's not helped by the fact he's given lines like "fortuitous" would be a more apposite epitaph.
True.
But as we said, everything he does is really just sort of, how do we put the Master into this scene? I know the Master will walk in, he'll say something crazy, the Rani will have a few jabs at him, and then he does something to annoy her, move on to the next scene. And it also doesn't help that both the Rani and the Doctor are making fun of him for being incompetent, but then he actually is shown to be incompetent.
Yes.
So I can see why Ainley in the end probably wished that he hadn't turned up for this one, because the Master just comes off here as a useless fool. You compare this to Planet of Fire, which I think is one of Ainley's best stories, where he's very much in control the whole time, he's menacing the whole time.
Yep.
Even the Master, reduced to 6 inches tall, can still, through chameleon, control a whole lot of stuff that's going on. The Doctor's intimidated by him, Perry's scared of him.
Yeah.
When he goes to burn them, it's actually like, oh crap, he's actually doing something.
Even something like Survival going forward.
Yes.
That's a much better use of the Master than it is here. No, he's bad.
There are plenty of good Ainley performances across his 10-odd years in Doctor Who.
This isn't one of them, though.
Which just, so something, whether this is how he wanted to and otherwise he was constrained, whether this is how JNT wanted to and was pushing in a certain direction, I don't know, but this is not a good Ainley performance.
No, but I mean, the script, as you said, the script really gives him very little to do, so what else can you do? Pantomime it up, basically.
To make an impression, I suppose, with the limited script that you've been given, I suppose, yeah.
Kat O'Mara, what do we make of the Rani? The now returned to New Who Rani. Have you seen that episode, Rob?
I have.
Yeah. How does Kat O'Mara compare?
Kat O'Mara does quite well comparing her to the current incarnation.
Yeah, I was getting, just going on, I'm sorry to sort of keep picking on it, I was getting a bit sick of her sniping with Ainley. Actually, it was much better when she was just being the Rani.
Yeah, so that was something that I took away when she's actually, in a sort of a Time Lady costume, doing Time Lady things. She's got a very cool TARDIS.
Yes.
Very, very good TARDIS set.
That is a great set.
That is definitely a highlight of the episode. When she's doing that sort of stuff and she can actually be a bit smug, a bit superior, I think the contrast between her just being quite confident and Ainley being pantomime-esque works quite well in her favour. When she's doing all that, it's really, really good. The first half where she's just sort of bumbling about as an old crone isn't that good. But I also think this is a very different performance to Time on the Rani, which is by far the Rani story I've seen more of, by virtue of it being sort of one of those ones where you always sort of go back and go, can it be as bad as I remember? Or, I want to watch McCoy's first story again and just see what it's like. So I've seen Time on the Rani quite a bit, plus we had it as an off-air dub when I was a kid, so it was one we had on tape. And it just is so obvious to me that Katamara played the Rani as intended by Pip and Jane Baker here, in a very serious sort of way. There's a certain archness to it, but it's a serious performance. She then buggers off to the US, does Dynasty, and then writes to JT and says, bring me back, I want to have some fun on Doctor Who, and just comes back and goes for it without a safety net. And it's just a completely different performance in Time of Rani. This is so much better.
I mean, look, her plan is kind of stupid, really, when you pick it to bits.
Yes.
But it kind of, look, if you gloss over some of that stuff and you don't think too hard about it, she does work. I actually think in a story just with her facing off against Colin would have been quite good.
Yeah.
Yes, Colin's interactions with her are very, very sparse.
Yeah, if she'd really just been manipulating look, you can argue about the historical stuff about the Luddites, but if she'd just been manipulating the mobs in the background and then had the big face-off with Colin, I actually think that would have worked quite well.
Or I actually think if she'd had a lot more time with Colin,
yes,
that would have been to both their benefit. Look, you're right. I was sort of watching this going, if she's such a brilliant scientist, why can't she sort of just find a way to do this very, very quickly? Just go back to the caveman times and do 1,000 of them in one go.
Well, that's right. Or synthesise something.
No, but I understand that if she does that, you don't have a story. So okay, I get that. But yeah, it was a good performance, but there wasn't enough of it. And part one would have been better had we had more of the Rani, being the Rani in part one.
Yep.
Yes. Well, part one is just, as we mentioned before, it is a lot of setup over the course of 45 minutes. So she's, the character that she's forced to play as the old crone is just, her time is extended.
So let's talk about some of the little good things that we found in this. We all did say the location footage works quite well. Yep. Although some of the footage is very clearly filmed in the drizzle and the cold.
Yes.
And it's a bit ordinary. I'm going to say that you're right, Richard. Something you mentioned in passing. I think that Pip and Jane Baker write Colin or the Sixth Doctor very, very well, and Colin plays to that. You can see the sort of the fun, elfish charm to Colin that you see here. Now, I've long said that Terror of the Vervoid is the best Sixth Doctor's performance, and that's really what Colin should have been. And it's clearly no coincidence that it's Pip and Jane writing both of them. I think that they absolutely get the fun side of the character, and I would put $5 on the table that TARDIS scene, which I completely forgotten that opening TARDIS scene, where he's sort of doing the shouty stuff. That's got to be an Eric Saward insertion, surely.
And look, he does actually struggle a little bit with that. The anger bit he has to show at the end of that is a little bit like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's clearly designed to just pad out that episode by that 45 seconds or 60 seconds, which is a real pity. But I suppose it also shows Saward's disdain for Colin Baker, really, his casting. So he should have put that tripe in his mouth, really.
Richard, you were here for our Twin Dilemma, Jin and TARDIS.
Yes.
How does the Sixth Doctor and Colin compare to that, do you reckon?
I actually think this is better than the Twin Dilemma.
Yes.
I think that goes without saying. I actually think Colin, look, he probably by this point has got a bit more into the role. He's not being asked to do stupid post-regenerative stuff and strangle his companion. The story, as we said, is, look, it's not great, but it's got enough nice little moments in it that you can watch it and sort of enjoy those. Whereas I don't think the Twin Dilemma had really that much in the way of redeeming features at all. So, and look, we were quite critical of it in the discussion. But look, he, I think, is by this point, as I said, you're right, look, this isn't his best performance. That probably comes later. But I think at this point, at least he's over the initial hurdles.
There's a sense that he's settled into the role, and there's a great deal of confidence with how he's portraying his version of the character.
Yeah, he certainly seems very comfortable in the role by this point, which comes across.
Plus, we've probably also got past the stuff where he and Nicola thought one didn't like the other, or they didn't like each other. So they're probably working better too, even though they're still unfortunately scripted as arguing all the time.
Yes. Now, for all the good writing that I thought the Sixth Doctor had, Perry, on the other hand, she gets a couple of good moments where she's the one that goes off to find the Valerian drug and make the sleeping draft, which is a good use for her background as a botanist. But I don't know how much it's writing and how much of it's portrayal, but I found Perry quite grating in this. And Rob, you sort of shouted out a couple of comments of a similar nature while we were watching it.
Yeah, I think perhaps it's the writing. They've got it in. They have a character in Perry who is a complainer. She's just, she's not reacting well to something that the doctor's saying, or she's not reacting well to the environment that she's in. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in the 1800s, for instance.
Yep.
If you wrote her differently, then you would get a more pleasing performance, less grating, as you would say.
Probably as
Dave?
you go into the season 23 kind of relationship they have, which I think is better.
Yes.
Looking forward. I mean, you've sort of gone through sort of argumentative Tegan pushing back at pretty much everything the Doctor says and does. This just comes more across as just carping, really.
Yeah.
And really you think, well, if you're that unhappy, why in God's name, when you were in London 2 stories ago, didn't you just take off?
Yes.
Or just say to the Doctor, look, I can't do this anymore, just take me home.
It's interspersed with sort of moments of some sense of fondness for the Doctor.
Yes.
But I think you're right, carping is the way it is written. And I was about to say the American accent doesn't help, but I think to be more particular, and particularly with respect to our American listeners, it's the British actress doing an American accent.
American, yes.
That doesn't work. Just the way that she sort of highlights some of those sort of American syllables really doesn't work at all. I did have a chuckle where the Doctor said to her, "Do you think I'd abandon you?" And I thought, well, we've seen Mind Warp. So yes.
It's coming.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know why the production team thought that sort of portrayal would be appealing to an audience. I mean, you're the Doctor's companion, so why have a companion who is feeling mistreated or maltreated? Why would she want to hang around? And if she doesn't want to hang around and she's the viewpoint character, why do I as a viewer want to hang around?
Yeah, and there's all that stuff about when Nicola was cast and she was working with Peter Davison and she sort of did the whole essay about her character and how the Doctor reminded her of her dead father when he went from her youth, and that's why she sort of went along, and then, she rationalised it as well. The Doctor gave her life to save her and all the rest of it. But yes, there is this sort of sense that she's written to work with Davo and she just, her attitude and Colin's attitude, or the Sixth Doctor's attitude, just don't work together, and they're just not well written here. And I think this is a rare example where the writers do find the Sixth Doctor interesting. And you watch interviews with Pip and Jane Baker, they do actually quite like Colin personally. They like the idea of the Sixth Doctor and the sort of character that he has, and they enjoyed writing that. And I just think they weren't that interested in Perry. And I wouldn't be surprised if Eric Saywood had perhaps in his script editing dialed that up as well, because that's how he saw the character.
Which is a real shame, because I think that if you put the right script in front of Nicola Bryant, you would get a much more appealing performance.
I don't think the story is helped by the fact that George Stevenson doesn't rock up until part 2.
No.
When in fact it's so random that he sort of pops out and robs you. Sort of, where did that guy come from?
Well, he's run out of the bushes.
Exactly, he's run out of the forest to save the Doctor. And I thought, why?
Yes,
why has he done that?
He's obviously aware his contract doesn't kick in until the cliffhanger, and then just sort of leaps into action. Because if you are going to do the sort of the famous historical character, to not have him in for the first half doesn't sort of work. And I don't think Stevenson is sort of that big a name that you can spend the whole first half going, where's George Stevenson?
Yes. It is interesting that as a child of the 80s, the production team assumed that you knew who George Stevenson was.
And indeed the other characters, the Humphrey Davy and Brunel.
Yes.
Faraday.
And Michael Faraday, yes.
And even the reference to the volcanic painting, the Doctor says it's a Turner.
Yes, that's right.
And there's no explanation to Perry who Turner was in terms of paintings, but, we live in fallen times, people, so...
Well, so this brings us on to perhaps the rationale of Pip and Jane Baker and the long discussion fans have had about Pip and Jane Baker. So, look, I watched this as a 5 or 6 year old, which I'm sure you'll tell us when it was broadcast soon, and I'll be able to pin that down exactly. But I actually remember turning to my dad at the end of that and going, "Oh, who is George Stevenson?" And Dad explained, well, he invented the steam engine and all the rest of it.
Yep.
So, if you accept Pip and Jane's rationale, I have no reason not to, that they saw it as their job to make Doctor Who an educational show, and it should be the sort of show where you do turn around to your parents at the end of it and go, "Oh, who's George Stevenson?" or "What does this mean?"
Yep.
And I think that's a very valid thing to do. So it does work, but you're right, it does hinge a bit too much on that. And if you don't know who George Stevenson is,
why do you care?
Why do you care? And certainly the other names. They also use that as their excuse or rationale for the dialogue. Now, I would say there's no problem putting big, unusual words into sentences such that an educated or an interested young kid watching would go, oh, that's a new word, I want to learn that word. But what they do is they put a string of them into a sentence that no person would ever utter. And it's just cringe. Like, as a kid you sort of go, okay, that's a bit weird. But at our age, just go, nobody would ever say
speak
that.
like that. Well, until we meet the Valeyard, but yeah, go on.
But, I mean, the Doctor gets it, but Stevenson gets these really weird lines, but Perry gets some just lines that no one would ever say. And unfortunately, it's then being scripted by Saywood, who is not... Look, I don't hate Eric Saywood. I think he's done a lot of good stuff. But he is not a writer of naturalistic dialogue at all.
No, and we're probably getting into the period, really, where he's past his use-by date, perhaps, I think.
His dissatisfaction rating is on the increase,
I
perhaps?
think so, yes.
With the whole show, with the whole thing.
With the whole show, yes.
Well, he's been here now, this is his third full season?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So he's probably getting a little... Well, look, as I've said, Saywood season 20, he's getting his feet under the desk. It's okay. Season 21, he goes in with this is what I want to do, and it's actually a pretty good vision. It works quite well. And here he's sort of like, well, I don't like the Doctor, I don't like the companion, I can't find any writers that want to write for me.
And I'm sick of J&T.
And I don't like J&T, so... Yeah.
And that point that you make about not being able to find writers, I think, is an unappreciated aspect of this particular era. Saywood is struggling mightily to find writers who are suitable for the show or who can deliver scripts. I mean, maybe he's being overly picky, but it's just a fact that he was just struggling a lot. And maybe, there was sometimes you got writers who are halfway decent, like Pip and Jane Baker, and you just sort of...
Well, they did have a reputation for being able to churn out usable scripts quite quickly.
Yeah.
That then the script editor could go away and work on and not have to ask for constant rewrites.
No, they were definitely experienced professionals. But you're right, Rob. Like, I've got pros and cons when it comes to Andrew Cartmell. I think he had some great strengths as a script editor. He had some faults as a script editor because he was very inexperienced. But over the course of 2 3/4 seasons as the script editor, he has found and groomed up to be good writers. Ian Briggs, Stephen Wyatt, Rona Munro, Ben Aronovich, and probably others that haven't come to mind. Graham Curry. Yep. Like he's gone away, and he said, had he been the script editor for season 27, he had 5 or 6 or 7 writers
that he could just go and call on.
That he could just go and call
trust.
On, all of whom that he had found, he'd worked with, and had made work.
Yep.
Eric Saywood at this point's going, no, I've got no one. I mean, he calls on his old mate Robert Holmes, fair enough. He writes one himself, okay. But then it's sort of J&T going, oh, why don't you go and use Pip and Jane Baker? Why don't you go and use, who wrote Varos?
Philip Martin.
Philip Martin.
Yep.
The person that Saywood does discover for season 22 writes Time Lash, which obviously takes a lot of work to get worked up, because it was his, second or third TV
Pretty
script.
much.
Yeah. What was his name?
Glenn McCoy.
Glenn McCoy, thank you. So, yeah, Saywood is perhaps sort of struggling just to find writers here. And then script editor himself. And obviously, look, he was probably much more excited to go and write Revelation himself at this point. Other members of the cast, anyone stand out for you?
I like the fellow, as I said before, the fellow who played the Lord.
Yes.
I quite enjoyed him.
Yep.
I can't remember his name, but I quite enjoyed his performance.
I just know he's the dad from Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, okay, all right. No, he was good. As I said before, he had a nice bit of a twinkle in his eye a couple of times with the lines, and a great deal of charm, and he sort of was able to stand up to the Doctor a little bit. I thought he was good. Yeah.
Look, the young guy playing Luke, I thought he was quite good.
Yes, I was actually very impressed with the guy who plays Luke, considering he's obviously a very young actor. And we commented when we were watching it, he's actually very, very good at playing possessed without sort of doing that, I am now possessed, playing a zombie. He actually just does a real, just subtle but effective shift in personality.
He does.
Such that it just gets a little bit creepier, a little bit more forced, and you go, okay, that's quite good. Now, we actually looked him up on IMDb before we turned the recording on, because none of us really knew him. He's been in a lot of stuff that we've heard of. No sort of big starring roles, but he's worked consistently until at least 2020. So
there you go.
He has actually made a career of it.
Good.
Yeah,
so that's good.
Pleased to hear that.
I guess amongst the other cast, look, Peter Childs as Jack Wood would be a known face for British TV watchers.
Not just because he was in Blake 7.
No, or Minder.
Yes.
But he really, the script does him really no favours at all, because he's got a few lines. He has to run around pretending to be violent, and then there is that rather strange scene where he's tied to the chair.
And you can see...
and Rob has doubled up, just for anybody listening at home. But
you can see clearly what the directors decided to do. is there's a conversation between two people. It's the Lord and Stevenson, maybe, I think.
Yeah.
And the director's gone, okay, we'll have them as a sort of a two-shot, but in the background between them, let's have Peter Childs sort of
trying to escape from the
struggling
chair
to get
or
away
something.
from the chair.
Gurning. He is gurning.
And they just said to him, look, 'cause it's about a 2.5 minute scene. And they just said to Peter Childs, just struggle to get away there. Oh, but because we're recording these guys, you can't make any sound.
Yeah, but
so
you can
he's
pull
just
faces.
You can just sort of this is and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. And it's up there with the Anthony Ainley just prancing around.
You probably needed Mark Strickson to come in and give him a couple of quick pointers in background acting.
How to just stealth your way through the set, but even some stuff just like where the Master starts monologuing, and Rob, you just called out. You just go on. Who's he speaking to?
Yeah,
when it's just.
I have a death to arrange.
and that's it. Look, not to go back to Anthony Ainley, but why not? Because we did have a good laugh there. So the Master has, the conceit of the story is the Master has taken the TARDIS off course to finally deal with the Doctor and wreak a terrible revenge thing on him. His plan, it seems to amount to watching the Doctor walk down a path, then turning to some Luddites and going, hey, he's a bit of a dick, go beat him up for me. That's the level of his plan.
And then throw his TARDIS down the mine shaft.
Well, that's plan B when plan A doesn't work. He goes and throws the TARDIS down the mine shaft, and it's like, even for the Only Master, this is just nonsense. It's utter nonsense.
It is. We're back to sort of King's Demons type stuff.
Don't remind me. No, this is worse than King's Demons. At least in King's Demons, the Doctor's rocked up by accident. This one, the Master has trapped him there.
Yeah, he's pulled him there to deal with him, and then does nothing.
Yes,
No.
and this is no, I'm going to draw the TARDIS into my trap, which is a block transfer computation, fake society, which is going to. No, I'm just going to drag him to the 1880s and get some Luddites to beat the crap out of him.
Peter Childs to beat him up for me.
I mean, when that's the premise of
and it starts with him hanging on the thing as a scarecrow.
Yes. I mean, and then he stumbles across the Rani, and like a kitten with a piece of wool, he's completely distracted by that and entranced, and then we move away from, killing the Doctor for a little bit.
While he fights with he sits there and snipes at the Rani. Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
And they talk about how the mouse ate the president's cat.
Oh, that's awful. That is just awful. That must be Sayward, because didn't Sayward write that story in DWM?
Oh, yes, there is that secret history of the Time Lords or whatever it was.
Mice or something.
Yes,
or
that's right.
Or something like
yes,
that.
That's right. God, that takes me back. I've been using it.
I'm sorry about that.
Look again. The conception of the Rani as and the Doctor has that line about human beings are just a walking pile of chemicals.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. She's meant to be utterly amoral,
and that's good. That's something that's really different in terms of the show. Usually, you've got your mustache twirling villains who want to take over the universe like the Master, but here we've got someone who's completely amoral and is only interested in achieving a particular result, not to conquer the world, but to achieve a chemical reaction.
Well, she's already conquered a world.
Yes, well, yes.
She has her own world, that's right.
Yes, of aliens.
Yes.
Although it's interesting, like, you say that, Rob, but watching it, where she gets those sort of lines about where Luke's better off as a tree, we'll come back in a moment, where Luke's better off as a tree than a human, it's also noted there that O'Mara still does play it a little bit mustache twirling, but he's like, well, he is better off, rather than a very dispassionate, well, yes. Of course he's better off.
Yes, but you could also argue that her performance in the second episode is a bit more arch than it is towards the end of the first episode.
Yes, and whilst that perhaps is not as in character as, three sad men sitting around on a couch 45 years later would like it to be, we do concede it makes the episode more enjoyable and watchable.
Yes.
So okay, fair enough. The tree. The tree. I will say the tree as a static prop was not as bad as I was expecting it to be.
Sufficiently tree-like. I did like the explosion, the way that was sort of all done.
Yes, they've done the compressed air or whatever it was. They blew up and then, But, yes, the branch sort of swinging down to give Nicola Bryant a quick touch-up or whatever it was.
It's silly today as it was 40 years ago.
Yes.
And not helped by the line, Perry, the tree won't hurt you. which again had us all.
I was going to say, I was just thinking if we'd gone down sort of the Evil Dead route or something.
Richard.
Well, we don't have to go quite as far as Evil Dead, but
it was also very obvious though when the two Luddites get turned into trees. They both very carefully manoeuvre into exactly the right spot in a very unnatural way. And that cut is not nearly as good as the Luke cut.
Look, I mean, there's an idea.
It's a very cool idea.
It is a cool idea. And, I mean, if you pondered it for 2 seconds, it's quite horrifying that Luke is still aware within his new tree form to be able to save Perry, who then goes away, and that's it for Luke. He's just a tree with no leaves, I noticed. So,
Yes, and look, Pip and Jane are very good at creating those sort of things. I mean, when they have a little bit more money, it's the opening of season for the time of the Rani, where they do the bubble trap. Like, that's a very cool idea, and it actually looks good. This is a very cool idea that looks okay until it moves, shall we say.
Yes.
Any other general points?
I appreciated the fact that they're trying to do a quasi-historical, and it's a historical sort of away from, say, London, so you're up in the north, I assume, with the lovely accents that everyone's putting on.
Yep.
Yeah, so I could appreciate that.
Yeah. There's a lot of good intent in this. There's a lot of good intent.
There is, and I think, as I said, it looks really good because they have actually gone to a working historical village location thing, and there's people in the streets. There's a lot of extras moving around the mine site. And
the children, the child labourers.
Yes, the one that Colin just sort of pats on the head as
I won't emancipate you, young lad. You carry on down the mine.
I mean, it's bad enough then. Could you imagine in a 2025 episode if the Doctor walked past a child labourer and just playfully patted on the head and let it go off to its corporatist fate? The Twitter uprising would be phenomenal. That's But even like we were just watching it because we were sort of keeping an eye out for the child labour, and we're sort of like, oh look, there's a poor suffering child, and the Doctor just comes along. Look, how's it going? Have a good day.
No, that probably wasn't great, but there were people moving around in the streets. The town looked inhabited.
It did actually, yes.
Yes. I mean, like I said earlier, it's great to be out of the studio, the sort of the sterile feel of a studio, and to be in a lived-in historical place is only to the benefit of the episode.
Absolutely.
The story.
Yeah, and whilst the direction I thought in the studio wasn't particularly good, the direction in the location filming was quite good. You do get those shots pointing up to the Master and the Rani. Yes. You get some large, good panning shots. You get some quite tense moments. The cutting's quite well. It's not at all terrible in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck when the Doctor in the second episode is walking into that dell, and the scene starts with a shot on a cobweb.
Yeah,
and then it pans sort of back, and it loses focus on that, and the Doctor, and then walks away. I thought that was quite well constructed.
Yeah. There is some good ideas and some good effort going into a lot of this. There are lots of nice little bits in here. It just doesn't hang together at all.
No, not really. The whole is less than the sum of its parts, I think.
And then Anthony Ainley is prancing his way through a terrible script.
Yeah.
Richard, you have some notes sitting next to you.
I do have a few little notes. We'll just talk about how this one was screened here. It was screened in Australia, so you'll find out how old you were.
Thank you.
Yes, it was screened here in Australia on the 8th to the 14th of January 1986.
So it's 5.5.
Yep. It's about 11 months after the UK.
That's not too bad.
Yep. Now, obviously, here we got the 4-part version, and I think all of us picked the cliffhangers.
No, sorry. We didn't pick the cliffhangers because they were obvious cliffhangers.
Well,
we picked them because
we knew them. Yes. Yes. And they are where the Master reveals himself to the Rani and says, "I'm indestructible."
Yes. Now, my memory as a kid was that it was when the Master first sort of pops up his reflection in the test tube. And that would have worked.
Yep.
But there is sort of about 45 seconds of just inane dialogue. And then at the end of one line, they get the cliffhanger. But that is better than the Australian Part 3 cliffhanger.
Which is basically, now where's he gone? Whee! Yes. Which is when the Doctor takes off out of Stevenson's office.
Yes. There are better Australian cliffhangers for season 22, but there are worse.
There are. Just to go slightly bigger picture, season 22 debuted here in December 1985. Now, even allowing for the issues with the case of Androzani, that's nearly 18 months after Australia had seen the end of season 21. Right. So we'd sat with Twin Dilemma for all that time.
Just percolating within it?
Yes. Now, by December 1985, when we got season 22, Doctor Who actually hadn't been on regularly for over a year. Since late 1984.
That is rare for us.
Yes, it is. There were a couple of one-offs. They showed K9 and Company, and there was a repeat of 5 Doctors. But yes, the ABC filled this extended televisual wasteland of no Doctor Who. If anyone remembers the ABC National, which was the ABC's attempt at doing an hour-long news and current affairs program from 6:30 to 7:30.
I was 5.
Yeah, well, no?
No, definitely not.
No. Yeah, it didn't rate very well. It was actually cancelled towards the end of 1985 and was replaced by Doctor Who. With ABC National starting at 6:30, the ABC obviously still had the half hour at 6 p.m. to fill. And they did cycle through a few programs at 6 o'clock. Now, I won't list them all, but the goodies got another couple of runs. Yes, those stalwarts. Inspector Gadget.
This is at 6 p.m.
Yeah,
at night.
6 p.m.
Against the commercial news networks.
Yes.
Broadcasts.
Yes.
My God.
Well,
Okay.
Don Adams.
Well, yes.
Look,
Yes.
I have very fond memories of Inspector Gadget, but again, I was 5.
Yes. We also got a series called Heroes, which is the New Zealand version of Sweet and Sour, about a young struggling band.
No, don't remember.
No, it starred Jay Lagaya and Michael Hurst, who, for anyone who remembers the Hercules series from the 90s, he was Hercules' sidekick, Aeolus.
I'll trust you on that
Yes. Now, we also got a series called Dreams, which was a US series about a struggling rock band.
I think I vaguely remember that.
It was a sitcom. It's done rather than a sort of a young adult sort of semi-drama series. This was done as a sitcom. It starred a very young pre-Full House John Stamos.
Oh, really?
It's pretty ordinary.
Oh, wow.
I do remember it. It is pretty ordinary. We actually here got all 13 episodes. In the States, it was cancelled after about 5. But they did show the whole thing here. One final one also for fans of Auntie Jack or Graham Bond. This is also the period where the ABC screened News Free Zone. Or indeed, as one wag, as the HTV guide called it, Joke Free Zone, which was a sort of a series of little skits. No, don't remember that one, Dave? No. They also showed, I think it was probably most notable because it showed historical clips from Auntie Jack.
Ah.
But yes, and I'll just quickly, at 5:30, this is also the period where the ABC are showing stuff like Star Blazers, Astro Boy,
I remember that.
Ulysses 31, Battle of the Planets.
Oh, I remember all of them.
All
Yes,
that really
yes.
cool stuff. Coming back to Doctor Who, when we did get into the screenings of season 22, it was paired with the second run of Inspector Gadget that we mentioned a moment or two ago.
I do remember that being the case, yeah.
Yes, Mark of the Rani actually was shown here in production order, so it was shown after the two Doctors instead of before.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Now, the end of season 22, just to wrap up, is probably most memorable when the ABC then showed the Mind Robber and the Crotons, and then went into that full run of all the Pertwees, which were the Australian debuts of Inferno, Mind of Evil, and the Demons.
And then on to season 12.
Yes. Now, the end of this run, in which finally, when they got to the end of the Pertwees in November 1986, this is actually pretty much the last time Doctor Who was shown in that traditional 6:30 time slot, until we get into the repeats in the 2000s.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
End of an era.
In Australia, yeah.
Yeah, because the McCoy era was shown at 5:30.
Well, because the trial season was on Saturday night or late Saturday afternoon, and then McCoy was shown at 5:30 in the afternoon show.
Do we know why there was that change?
I think there was I do remember reading something that when season 22, the ABC initially contracted to buy it, they actually thought the show had been cancelled. So there was going to be that sort of run to clear the repeat rights, and then they could maybe walk away from Doctor Who. But obviously that didn't come to pass.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
But I guess the other thing is that's when they start doing the afternoon show.
very much, so,
And they need young adult friendly shows to
Absolutely.
put on that, and Doctor Who was just fitted in there, along
very
with
much
Press
so.
Gang, and you can't do that on television, and Degrassi Junior
Degrassi,
High.
yeah.
Fair enough. So look, given that Carlton has just blown a 24-point lead to lose by 27 points,
Oh no!
my afternoon hasn't got any better. So look, I will say as a sort of a final comment to wrap this up from my point of view, I walked in here thinking I was going to like this more than I did. I knew it wasn't a Colin I was particularly fond of, but I thought I was going to find a lot more to enjoy. And usually watching in the company of friends with the GMT does help to lift the story, but it did get better as it went along, but this was just a very difficult story to watch. It's not a good story in my view.
No, it's not. I don't know whether watching it as maybe over 2 or 3 days might make a difference. I don't know.
I think watching just part 2 would help.
Yeah, I was watching this, and I was, at the 5 or 6 minute mark, and I was thinking, this is extremely slow.
Well, you did say even that first shot, that lingering shot on the mine was, that's 20 seconds of just
Oh, it's more than that.
watching a
It seemed like the first 5 or 6 minutes was just establishing shots everywhere. It was a real downer, to be honest. Yeah, but it did pick up. I'll give it that. It did pick up in the second episode.
It picked up in the second episode. It's one of Colin's better performances as the Sixth Doctor.
Yep.
And Kate O'Mara is far better in this than Time in the Rani. So, 3 positives to take away from a not great story.
Now, just before we sign off very quickly, just for the gin aficionados out there, our gin of choice today was 23rd Street Signature Gin. What do we think of that? Went down quite well, actually.
It went down quite well. You were definitely mixing it in some very generous portions.
Yes.
So,
I think the second and third ones were a lot more generous than the first. But yes.
Well, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Gents, thank you for joining us for this episode of Gin and TARDIS. Next time we gather, we haven't done anything from the Patrick Troughton era yet. And part of that has been because the rules we set up for Gin and TARDIS when we negotiated this format were that it needed to be a classic story, 4 parts or less, that existed.
Yes.
Now, for the Troughton era, that only gives us 2 options, which is Tomb and the Crotons, both of which we sort of felt between us we didn't have a lot new to say. You know, we think that Tomb's great, we think that Crotons isn't. So what we've decided to do is bend the rules a bit for this one, and we've decided we're going to do 4 separate episodes of Troughton. So some negotiation to go, but I think where we're probably going to land is Evil of the Daleks Part 2, Abominable Snowman Part 2, and Wheel in Space 3 and 6, which gives us 4 episodes of Troughton. So a slightly different format next time, but we don't want to ignore Patrick Troughton because we all love him.
Yes. Underwater Menace 3 all the way.
We'll negotiate. And at the end of the day, it's my house and my microphone.
Actually, it's my microphone.
On that note, thank you for joining us. There will be a lot more coming out from the Doctor Who show this month. We've just released a list makers on top 5 master stories. Spoiler, neither Rob or I put the Mark of the Rani into that list. We will have our next alternate galaxies, which will be on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, coming out next week.
Nice.
There'll be a little surprise the week after, and then we're back to Colin for a monthly show with The Trial of a Time Lord. So, a lot to talk about in August on the Doctor Who show. But until then, I've been Dave.
I'm Richard.
I'm Rob.
And we'll speak again soon.
I popped from my TARDIS, got mud on my shoe. Perry said, "Doctor, just what did you do?" There were miners all shouting and smashing up steam. One threw a shovel, it chipped my self-esteem. The town was a riot, and what did I find? 2 dodgy Time Lords, both out of their mind. The Rani was scheming, the Master was mad. They were stealing folks' brains, which I thought was quite bad. She ruled a whole planet where no one can sleep, so she popped down to Earth for some brains to reap. She bottled them up in a manner quite gory, said it's science, my dear, not a bedtime story. Meanwhile, dear Perry was picking up weeds to make sleepy tea for the miners' needs. She stepped in a bell full of mines, quite absurd, got flung through a hedge and disturbed a small bird. I crept in the Rani's old TARDIS of doom, which smelled like wet dinosaurs sealed in a room. Jars full of lizards and eggs on the floor. Loads of mad science stuff that made me unsure. The Master and Rani gave one last hurrah, till a baby T-Rex fell out of a jar. They stuck to the wall as the console went bang, and I legged it quick with a zap and a twang. We gave back the brain juice as heroes do, to Stevenson, Ravensworth, gentlemen too. They offered me scones, but I needed to dash, so I pinched the last biscuit and vanished in a flash. So if someone starts nicking your frontal lobe goo, just call for the doctor, I might rescue you. But mind your head and stay clear of that dell. That Rani's a menace, and frankly not well.